All right, everyone. Possibly the most notable celebrity death of 2023, Ron DeSantis' presidential ambitions. While Nikki Haley is the one actively torpedoing herself right now because she's gotten shit-canned with her Civil War comments, again, I explain nuance does exist with regards to the cause of the Civil War. It's not just about slavery, but you can't omit mentioning that, especially when you're running for office, because most Americans don't understand that nuance. They were never taught it. They know nothing about the Tariff of Abominations or anything like that. Anyway, Ron DeSantis, though, he torpedoed himself earlier for a number of reasons. That's why his main PAC, the Never Back Down PAC, has basically collapsed. It's gone through 3 or maybe now 4 leaders in the last few months. They're hemorrhaging money. They don't appear to be effectively very operative, actually, at this moment. Ron DeSantis had a number of problems. The first problem is his personality. And this gets, I think, overstated by some people. Well, he's like a wet blanket. Okay, his personality isn't terrible, but it's not very charismatic. He had every advantage, by the way, in entering the race. The first mistake that he made, though, is something that's discounted by basically every other commentator. He waited too long. He should have gotten in earlier or not gotten in at all. If he had gotten in originally when he was riding high, he was up in the 30s, actually, in aggregated polling. He was barely outside of within the double-digit margin behind Trump. He was viable. He decided to sit and wait and continuously edge people with, well, maybe I'll get in. I haven't decided yet. I'm saying it's a possibility. It's possible that I'll get in, but he did that for multiple months, and over that period of time in aggregated polling, he was sinking. Others started getting into the race. They started gobbling up airtime that he otherwise would have gotten, and I have no doubt that if Ron DeSantis had gotten in a few months earlier, that some of the other people wouldn't have gotten in at all. It would not have been a packed field. I don't think Asa Hutchinson would have bothered. I don't think Doug Burgum would have bothered. Hell, Ramaswamy might not have bothered, because Ron DeSantis would be riding in the 30s. It would basically be the tale of two candidacies. That was his first mistake, waiting too long. Now, many of us said, well, it's probably best he doesn't get into the race because he likely doesn't win. When he first did, though, you'll remember, shy of HB 269, which wasn't a sticking point for most people, but was a red line for me. I announced that, and he crossed that line, so I couldn't support him. I said prior to that I would consider supporting him, that if he won in a fair primary against Trump, I would have had no problem with him as a candidate. He was trolling the left with Martha's Vineyard, trolling the NIMBYist, the wine-totaling NIMBYists of Martha's Vineyard, who are like 80% Democrats, by the way, because they're sheltered from the economics of the Biden administration, so they don't see a problem because, you know, anyone who can pay $20,000 a month to rent a McMansion in Martha's Vineyard, probably they've got enough investments to hedge against Bidenflation. They probably don't have any problems fiscally. Oh my God, I had to downsize from an 8-bedroom house to a 6-bedroom house. I'm basically poor now. That's basically the white liberal NIMBYist mindset, by the way. So the second problem, I mean, for me, was HB 269. The second problem for his campaign in general, though, was its launch. The launch of Ron DeSantis' campaign, it's sort of like, you know, when a ship at sea is launched. If anything goes wrong in that launch, it lurches over, the champagne bottle doesn't break on the hull on the first try, something like that. Fishermen and sailors and stuff get all superstitious about that and say, well, maybe the ship is cursed. Well, Ron DeSantis' campaign announcement was novel. The first major presidential campaign to be announced through an unorthodox methodology. Normally, it's they hold a press conference, they're at a rally, they hold a big get-together, something like that. He decided to launch it on Twitter. Now, again, I praised him at the time and said, that's not a bad idea. You're going to get attention for it. The problem is the attention was largely negative because the campaign launch didn't really go off well. For the first half hour, they couldn't figure out how to get the call working, and it was basically Elon Musk and Ron DeSantis and a few others muttering to each other for a while. They end that, they restarted, it's kind of working, but by then a lot of people had lost interest. And so the main news about the campaign launch was not, hey, Ron DeSantis is in for 24. It was, hey, Ron DeSantis getting in didn't go off very well, hee. And the legacy media, of course, dogpiled it because they were gunning for Twitter at the time anyway. And so they gobbled it down and they spewed it out all over the place like dirty diarrhea. And I actually feel slightly sorry for the DeSantis campaign because, I don't like the legacy media. If Ron DeSantis has shortcomings and failings, legacy media is a lot worse. They defame him as much as they do Trump or everyone other than Nikki Haley, actually. You'll notice a startling lack of negative coverage of her except over the Civil War commentary. They had no choice but to criticize her for that one, and they probably sighed and bowed their heads solemnly because they would love her to be the nominee. I do think she is the neocon candidate. I do not think that about Ron DeSantis. And then the third problem, so you've got he waited too long, the campaign launch sucked, basically, and then you have lackluster debate performances. Nikki Haley and Ramaswamy gobbled up all the energy at all four Republican also-ran debates. Ron DeSantis never really found his footing. That is, his core fans would dogpile the polls and gush over how well he did, and he had more fans than the others, so naturally in those polls he looked up. But realistically speaking, a reasonable person who didn't have bias within that field, because they were already, in my case, like already supporting Trump, so I basically watched them as a labor of love more than anything else, just so I can analyze them. Ron DeSantis was middle of the road. Doug Burgum had good moments when he was allowed to speak. Chris Christie did his normal, dab on him, attack dog thing. Didn't really work well, but, he's not rhetorically untalented. Nikki Haley gave the best rhetorical speeches in general, and Ramaswamy delivered the best sidewinders. He attacked Haley, DeSantis, he certainly went after Christie a few times, and he's the only one, by the way, that suffered a significant attack by Christie and managed to 180 it and direct it right back at him. He is the best debater, Haley was the best speaker. Well, that doesn't leave a lot of breathing room for anyone else. Really, you only have room for 2 or 3 people to be sort of at that top. In the end, Ron DeSantis just didn't do terribly well. Not bad. I mean, he wasn't Mike Pence, the literal wet blanket of the election cycle, but he never had a breakout moment, and he needed that because he was beginning to fall in the polls. Haley, of course, recently, although probably not in the last 72 hours, certainly rising up in the polls, and so he sort of got squeezed out. And then the final mistake he made was putting all of his eggs in one basket with Iowa. I strongly believe that he would have been more competitive in New Hampshire. He wouldn't be in 4th place there, by the way, behind fucking Chris Christie, had he bothered to campaign elsewhere. He assumed, I'm going to win Iowa, and then that'll give me a boost. That puts me at least above the other candidates in the starting states. I come in at least a strong second in New Hampshire, and in South Carolina, then Haley drops out at that point. I'm the only one left standing against Trump on Super Tuesday. I gobble down a few more states. I'm viable. It now looks like that's no longer possible. He no longer has enough time, or campaign finance, by the way, to pull things off. The other major mistake was his campaign manager hiring twice the people that they needed on the expectation that once he got in, he would quickly rise up because of Trump derangement syndrome. That never happened. And Indictment Gate really sealed the deal. If anything, people who were soft Trump support, they're like, well, I like the dude, but I'm not so sure about this. I don't know if he can win. All of a sudden, they got all fired up because they see the man get persecuted, and now Trump's riding up towards 60 in the aggregated polling. There's no longer enough room for anybody else to possibly defeat him. I do genuinely believe Trump will win Iowa. That basically seals the deal. Haley had a long shot odds in New Hampshire. I think that dream is dead now. Basically, by Nevada and South Carolina, you'll know that Trump will be the indisputable nominee. And on Super Tuesday, I expect him to run the field. That's about all. Peace out.